What if I told you that the very desire you feel for women is the same force that weakens your mind, strips your focus, and keeps you blind to truth? In today's world, men are not only distracted by beauty, but enslaved by the constant flood of it. Open your phone, and it is everywhere. Scroll through Instagram, and you see filters and angles that make every woman look like a goddess. Dating apps hand you endless options that never existed in human history. A single swipe offers temptation that men of the past never had to resist. The attention economy is designed to keep you chasing, always clicking, always craving, never satisfied. This is not just a distraction, this is a system. And the man who lets desire control him is no longer a man of reason. He is a consumer. He is a follower. He is a slave to a game designed to drain him of his time, his money, and his wisdom. Socrates warned that desire is the enemy of wisdom because it chains the soul to illusions. Today, those illusions are stronger than ever. Men trade their strength for likes on a picture. They sacrifice their peace for the chance to be noticed. They pour their energy into chasing women who live in a digital world of constant validation, where one man's attention is never enough. The truth is simple. A man who is ruled by desire cannot rule himself. He loses clarity, he loses discipline, and he loses the ability to see beyond the next moment of pleasure. That is why wisdom dies the moment desire becomes his master. This is the truth that modern men refuse to hear, but it is the truth that will set them free. Walk into any city street today, and you will see it. Men with their eyes glued to women, pulled by attraction that feels natural, but quietly eats away at their strength. Desire does not announce itself as danger. It presents itself as excitement, as motivation, even as love. Yet the man who allows desire to lead him quickly finds that his focus, his discipline, and his judgment begin to slip. He spends money he has not earned to impress her. He sacrifices his plans to gain her time. He places her opinion above his own growth, and little by little, he forgets who he is. In a world filled with endless entertainment, gyms with mirrors lined wall to wall, and careers that demand constant focus, desire is not a simple urge anymore. It has become a fire that burns away progress. The man who is ruled by it is no longer building his future. He is feeding a flame that never goes out. The reality is that desire grows stronger because everything around us encourages it. Advertisements sell products using attraction. Music glorifies chasing women as if it is the highest purpose a man can have. Even workplaces create an environment where men risk their careers because they confuse attention for connection. Every distraction in life becomes sharper when desire enters, because the man who should be centered in discipline starts chasing what cannot be held. He cannot see his own reflection clearly because he is blinded by what he craves. Wisdom requires patience, clarity, and strength, but desire erases all three. It does not care about his goals or his values. It only demands that he surrender to it again and again. And once he does, he realizes that the fire he fed has already consumed him. Every man knows the feeling of chasing something that seems rewarding in the moment, but leaves him emptier once it is over. Desire for women creates this exact trap. The thrill of her attention, the excitement of her body, or the validation of her choosing, you feels powerful at first, but it fades as quickly as it arrives. The problem is not the feeling itself, but the cycle it creates. Once the pleasure is gone, the craving begins again. This is why so many men repeat the same patterns, moving from one woman to the next, never realizing that the pursuit itself has become the prison. Modern men think they are gaining strength through these moments, but in reality, they are draining it. Nights spent chasing quick pleasure leave them waking up tired, unfocused, and further behind in their own lives. What once felt like victory becomes the very reason their energy is gone when it is needed most. Look at how this illusion plays out in reality today. Men spend paychecks on dinners, clubs, and trips just to feel wanted for a few hours. They spend years of their youth consumed by casual encounters, believing they are living free while their health, finances, and purpose fall apart. The cost of pleasure always outweighs its value. When the excitement ends, he is left with nothing but regret that time and effort were wasted. The illusion is dangerous because it convinces him that the next experience will be different, that the next woman will finally make him feel complete. Yet each time it ends the same way, with him returning to the same empty space, weaker than before. Pleasure is not the problem. Believing it is the answer is what destroys wisdom. A man can be intelligent in business, disciplined in training, and respected among his peers, yet lose all of it the moment desire clouds his judgment. Reason is what separates strength from weakness, but when desire enters, logic bends. A man who once stood firm on his principles will excuse behavior he knows is destructive simply because he does not want to lose her. He will defend actions that disrespect him. He will ignore red flags he would normally call out in others. What he sees in front of him is not reality, but the picture he wants to believe. Men in this position lie to themselves daily, convincing their own minds that what they feel is more important than what they know. In truth, the downfall has already begun because once reason is compromised, every other part of a man's life becomes vulnerable. We see this collapse clearly in the world today. Men risk their freedom for women they barely know. They neglect their families to chase a thrill. They lose careers because they cannot control their impulses at work. Even leaders with years of discipline have watched their reputations fall apart because desire made them believe rules no longer applied to them. This is not weakness in the moment. It is weakness in judgment, built over time by allowing desire to silence reason. The modern world rewards attention and instant gratification, so men believe they can live without consequences. But reality always arrives. The man who abandons reason for desire will always pay with regret. He thought he was gaining love, but he was only trading away clarity. And when clarity is lost, wisdom has already been destroyed. Reason is the foundation, and once it falls, everything else follows. Every man is given a limited amount of energy in his life, and where he spends it decides who he becomes. The tragedy today is that too many men waste their best years chasing women instead of building themselves. Desire makes them believe that attention from her is proof of value, but in reality, it steals the focus that should have been invested in their health, their skills, and their future. A man who cannot control this urge spends his nights chasing numbers in his phone and his mornings waking up with no progress made. Purpose requires consistent work, but desire convinces him that pleasure is more urgent. He looks back years later and wonders why his goals were never reached, never realizing it was because he traded hours of discipline for minutes of validation. Reality shows us this everywhere. Men skip workouts to meet women. They drain their savings on dinners, vacations, and gifts that bring nothing lasting. They turn down opportunities to learn, to travel, to create, because they fear missing a chance with someone who often does not even value them. Some even build their entire identity around being wanted, as if their legacy will be written by who they slept with rather than what they built. That is why so many reach their 30s and 40s with nothing solid under their feet. They chased endlessly, but never built anything that outlived the moment. A man who understands purpose knows that every hour matters. He trains his body, strengthens his mind, and builds a foundation that no one can take from him. Desire wants him distracted. Purpose demands he stay sharp. The man who chooses purpose becomes untouchable because he refuses to give his future away for temporary pleasure. Step into any environment today, and you will see the game at play. Gyms filled with men pushing iron, not for health or discipline, but for the chance of being noticed. Clubs packed with men competing for the same women, each trying to outspend the other with bottles and tables. Even offices turn into arenas where men dress, act, and speak less for the work and more for the attention of women around them. This is not strength. This is the marketplace of vanity, where men place themselves on display, hoping to be chosen. The danger here is not only the competition, but the loss of identity. A man who lives for approval ends up shaping his entire image to match what he thinks she wants. He is not living his truth. He is selling a version of himself, and in that process, he forgets who he really is. The reality is brutal. Women today have more access to attention than any generation before them, and men fuel it by constantly offering themselves as bidders. They think they are playing the game, but the truth is, they are the product. A man who spends his nights performing for validation, whether online or in person, becomes part of a cycle that strips him of power. He begins to measure his value by how much attention he receives, rather than what he builds or achieves. This is why so many men feel empty, even when they are surrounded by women. They are winning in the marketplace of vanity, but losing in life. The illusion of importance keeps them trapped. Only the man who removes himself from the auction, who refuses to compete for shallow approval, can reclaim his strength. Scarcity of attention is where true power begins. A man's strength is measured not by how much he desires, but by how much he can resist. The moment desire for women becomes the center of his actions, discipline begins to fade. A man who once had strict routines will suddenly skip the gym, stay up late, or neglect his studies and work just to satisfy the craving for attention. He convinces himself that it is temporary, that he can manage both, yet his results tell a different story. The hours once invested in progress are now spent chasing conversations, arranging meetups, or scrolling endlessly for the next spark. Over time, this consistent neglect destroys the structure that discipline once built. Without discipline, every achievement becomes fragile, because the man is no longer controlling himself. He is being controlled by impulse. You can see this in countless examples around us today. Athletes ruin their training schedules because they prioritize nightlife. Students sacrifice their performance because their minds are consumed with chasing relationships. Professionals throw away promotions because they allow distractions to dominate their focus. It always begins small, a missed task here, a skipped routine there, but it builds until discipline is no longer a part of their life. The truth is simple. No empire can be built on inconsistency. Discipline is what creates growth in health, wealth, and skill, but desire eats away at that foundation piece by piece. Men wonder why they feel stuck, why their lives are not moving forward, and the answer lies in what they prioritize. Every choice adds or subtracts from discipline. If desire keeps winning, discipline keeps dying. And when discipline dies, so does the man's ability to rise above the mediocrity that the modern world has prepared for him. There is nothing more dangerous to a man than believing his worth comes from how much attention he receives from women. Validation has become the drug of this generation. Men who once took pride in their work, their bodies, or their discipline now measure themselves by the number of messages on their phones or the glances they get when they walk into a room. This is why so many chase endlessly without ever feeling satisfied. Validation never lasts. It must constantly be earned again, and every time a man gets it, he needs more. The danger is not in the attention itself, but in the dependence it creates. Once validation becomes the standard of self-worth, a man is no longer free. He becomes a slave to approval, shaping his choices around what others think instead of what he knows is right. We see this everywhere in today's world. Men who spend hours editing pictures to look desirable. Men who buy cars and clothes they cannot afford just to impress women who forget them tomorrow. Even in daily life, men abandon their own values because they fear rejection. They try to please instead of standing firm. They become agreeable instead of truthful. In the end, validation weakens them because it forces them to trade authenticity for acceptance. A man who chases validation is always running, always bending, always seeking permission to feel valuable. Yet real power has never come from being chosen. It comes from being unshakable in who you are, even when no one is watching. The man who understands this breaks free from the trap. He no longer needs the world to clap for him. He lives by his own standards, and in that freedom, he discovers true strength. Time is the most valuable resource a man will ever own, yet it is also the one most often wasted in the pursuit of women. A man who spends hours sending messages, waiting on replies, planning dates, or scrolling endlessly for attention, convinces himself that he is living, but in truth, he is bleeding time. He will never recover. The clock does not pause while he chases, and every year lost to distraction is a year taken away from building the foundation of his future. Men who could have mastered skills, grown businesses, traveled the world, or built their health strong enough to last a lifetime, instead find themselves stuck in the same loop, repeating the same cycle with different faces. The harsh reality is that time invested in empty pursuits is gone forever, and the man who refuses to see this only wakes up when it is too late. The evidence is all around us today. Men in their 30s regret wasting their 20s chasing women instead of building themselves. Men in their 40s look back and realize they have nothing lasting to show for all the time spent on short-term pleasure. Even young men in their early 20s admit they feel years behind because they chose parties and hookups over learning and creating. Time is unforgiving. It does not give second chances, and it punishes every man who throws it away. A man who values his time treats it as sacred. He understands that hours must be guarded with the. A man without control of his desires eventually forgets who he really is. When his focus revolves around women, his personality bends and shifts depending on who is in front of him. He acts confident when he believes it will impress her, and he hides his true thoughts when he fears they might push her away. Over time, this performance becomes his reality, and the man can no longer separate his authentic self from the image he created to be accepted. What begins as small compromises, like pretending to enjoy certain activities or agreeing with things he disagrees with, grows into a habit of living a life that is not his own. The tragedy is that a man can spend years in this role only to realize he built nothing of substance because he never stood firm in his own values. The world today amplifies this erosion of identity. Men copy how others dress, speak, and act, not because it is true to them, but because they hope it will draw attention. They follow trends without question, shaping their style and behavior based on what women seem to desire at the moment. Some even lose lifelong friendships or abandon passions they once loved because they feel those things do not make them attractive. This slow transformation leaves them hollow, always searching for who they are supposed to be rather than who they already are. Identity cannot be bought, borrowed, or performed. It is built by living with conviction, by saying no when it matters, and by refusing to compromise principles for approval. The man who allows desire to rewrite his identity does not just lose wisdom. He loses himself entirely, and nothing in life is more destructive than becoming a stranger to your own soul. Money reveals a man's discipline more than his words ever will, yet desire for women has caused countless men to destroy their financial stability. Many convince themselves that spending is necessary to win attention, so they pour their earnings into dinners, vacations, and luxuries that provide nothing lasting. A man who works long hours only to watch his paycheck disappear on temporary thrills is not building wealth. He is burning it. The illusion of romance often disguises itself as generosity, but the result is the same: accounts drained, debts rising, and opportunities lost. The pursuit of women becomes expensive, not because of love, but because of the constant need to prove worth through spending. In truth, every dollar wasted in this way could have been invested into skills, assets, or ventures that create freedom instead of chains. The evidence of this collapse is everywhere in modern society. Men who could own homes remain stuck renting because they spent their savings trying to impress. Men who could have started businesses are trapped in jobs they hate because they wasted years of income on nightlife and gifts. Even young men in their 20s, who should be laying financial foundations, find themselves living paycheck to paycheck because they traded discipline for validation. The tragedy is that most only recognize the cost when the damage is already done, when the bills pile higher than their pride, and when they realize the women they spent on have long since moved on. Money is not just currency. It is a reflection of time, effort, and sacrifice, and once it is thrown away, it cannot be recovered. The man who learns to guard his finances from desire not only protects his future, but also proves he values himself more than approval. Every man will leave something behind, whether it is strength, wisdom, wealth, or weakness. The truth is that most men today fail to build a legacy because they spend their best years consumed by the chase. The focus that could have been directed toward creating a business, raising a strong family, or establishing a name that carries weight is instead wasted on temporary moments. A man who spends his time pursuing women without direction eventually realizes he has nothing that outlives the moment. The world does not remember how many people desired you. It remembers what you created, what you stood for, and what impact you left behind. Without that, a man fades quickly once the thrill of youth is gone. Legacy is not written in pleasure. It is written in discipline, sacrifice, and the courage to stand apart when everyone else is distracted. In our world today, distractions are endless. Men waste decades proving themselves to people who will not even remember their names 5 years later. They trade the building of foundations for the fleeting approval of strangers. Yet history shows us that the men who are remembered are not the ones who chased desire, but the ones who mastered it. They built families that endured, institutions that grew, and work that inspired. The modern man who refuses to build is not just wasting time, he is erasing himself from history. The decline of legacy is the silent cost of desire, and it leaves generations weaker than they could have been. When your years have passed and the noise of youth has faded, will there be anything left with your name on it?